The sun rose slowly over Fall River, Massachusetts, casting a pale gold hue across the rooftops of a town known for its manners, its mills, and its secrets. On 2nd Street, the Borden house stood tall, plain, and proper. Nothing about its modest frame hinted at the horror that would soon take place within its walls. Inside, the air was still. Andrew Borden, a stern man with thinning white hair and a love for order, sat down in his usual spot on the parlor couch. He had made his fortune in banking and real estate, yet refused to install indoor plumbing. Frugal to a fault, he ruled his household like a ledger book. No affection, no warmth, just rules. His wife, Abby Borden, was a stout woman who moved through the home with silent efficiency. To Lizzie and her older sister Emma, Abby was never quite a mother, more like a placeholder, a wedge driven between them and the father they barely understood. That morning, Lizzie, 32 years old and still unmarried, descended the stairs dressed in calm gray. Her relationship with Abby had long been strained, cold at best. The day before, a bitter argument had occurred over the division of property. The Borden girls feared that Abby, or her family, would soon inherit everything if their father passed first. The only other soul in the house was Bridget Sullivan, the maid. She moved through the kitchen with practiced hands and tired eyes, coughing lightly as she prepared the morning meal. The Borden household was no easy place to work. Bridget, an Irish immigrant, bore the weight of expectations in silence. That morning, she was told to wash the windows, despite the stifling August heat. She obeyed, but with resentment bubbling just beneath the surface. As the clock struck 9 a.m., Lizzie lingered in the dining room. Abby had reportedly gone upstairs to make the guest bed. Andrew sat reading the paper. Bridget toiled in the back. The quiet was so thick, it felt unnatural. Then, a sudden thud, barely audible. A pause. Another. But no one screamed. By 10:30, Andrew Borden lay motionless on the parlor couch. His face was nearly unrecognizable, caved in by what police would later describe as sharp force trauma. Blood soaked through the carpet. His eyes, still open, stared blankly into nothing. Abby Borden was nowhere to be seen. Lizzie, now in the kitchen, called out calmly, "Someone's killed father." Panic erupted, but strangely, Lizzie remained composed. The maid was sent to fetch help. Neighbors rushed in. Then upstairs in the guest room, a second horror. Abby's body lay face down, cold and stiff. She had been struck 19 times with what appeared to be an axe. Within an hour, the peaceful home on 2nd Street transformed into the scene of one of America's most notorious double murders. But at that moment, just before the bodies were found, the house was still, the town unaware. A quiet morning in Fall River, and the beginning of a story that would never die. The Borden house was no longer quiet. Within minutes of Lizzie's chilling words, "Father's been killed," the calm that had cloaked 2nd Street shattered in a panic. Bridget ran to fetch the family doctor. Neighbors arrived in shock, but the sight in the parlor stopped everyone cold. Andrew Borden's body lay slumped on the sitting room couch, his head savagely bludgeoned. Blood soaked his shirt and pooled beneath him. His face had been struck with such force that one of his eyes was split in two. It looked less like murder and more like butchery. What made it worse was the absence of any obvious sign of a break-in. The doors had been locked. The windows were closed. There was no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, no scattered papers. Nothing was stolen. Whoever had killed Andrew Borden had done so quickly, methodically, and without leaving a trace. Police arrived just after 11 a.m. They questioned Lizzie first. She appeared calm, almost eerily so. She told them she had been in the barn out back, looking for sinkers for a planned fishing trip. But officers noted something odd. It was brutally hot that day, and the barn was stifling. Dust lay undisturbed on the floorboards. If Lizzie had been inside, her tracks weren't visible. As officers examined the house, someone ventured upstairs to the guest room, where Abby Borden had last been seen. There, beside the neatly made bed, they found her body sprawled on the floor, cold and congealed with blood. She had been murdered before Andrew, struck from behind with at least 18 blows to the head and neck. Two people, murdered hours apart in the same house. No one had seen or heard an intruder. No one had forced entry. The house had remained locked from the inside. The suspicion was inevitable. Lizzie changed her story. First, she said she was in the barn. Then, she claimed to be in the house. She didn't hear anything, she insisted. She hadn't seen anyone suspicious. Her contradictions piled up. Why hadn't she heard her stepmother being killed just above her head? How had she remained so clean, so composed? Then came the discovery of a hatchet in the basement. The handle had been freshly broken off. Though it was never conclusively proven to be the murder weapon, it seemed suspiciously well placed. It had no fingerprints, but it also looked deliberately cleaned. And Lizzie had reportedly been seen burning a dress in the kitchen stove 2 days after the murder. She told friends it was stained with paint. The town buzzed with theories. Could a stranger have entered undetected, killed 2 people, and vanished without a sound? Or was the answer closer to home? Lizzie Borden, the demure Sunday school teacher, the quiet spinster, now found herself at the center of one of the most brutal murders in American history. And everyone wanted to know, was she a grieving daughter or a cold-blooded killer? The arrest came quickly. Just over a week after the murders, on August 11th, 1892, Lizzie Borden was charged with the brutal killings of her father and stepmother. Fall River held its breath. Newspapers across the country plastered her face on the front page. For many, it wasn't just a trial. It was a spectacle, a test of class, gender, and justice. Lizzie entered the courtroom wearing black silk, her expression calm and unreadable. Reporters described her as composed, even dignified, not the image of a killer, not the woman the prosecution claimed had committed a savage double murder in broad daylight. But the case against her was chilling. The prosecution argued motive, money, and resentment. With her parents dead, Lizzie and her sister Emma would inherit their father's considerable fortune, something they long feared would be lost to Abby's family. The defense of self-control didn't hold up against the mounting family tension. Witnesses recalled frequent arguments and icy silence in the home. Then came the timeline. Abby Borden had been killed around 9:30 a.m., Andrew closer to 11 o'clock. Lizzie had been home the entire time. She claimed to have been in the barn, but investigators found no footprints in the dusty floor and no evidence she'd been there long enough to miss the second murder. The hatchet in the basement was presented, as was the story of the burned dress. Lizzie had told a friend she destroyed it because of paint stains. But was it paint or blood? No one could say for sure. And because the dress was gone, neither could the court. The prosecution painted Lizzie as a manipulative, calculating woman hiding behind the veil of femininity and social respectability. They pointed to her strange calmness, her shifting alibis, and the house's locked doors. If it wasn't her, then who? But the defense countered powerfully. They reminded the jury there were no witnesses, no bloody clothes, no fingerprints. Lizzie had no history of violence. She was active in her church, loved animals, and had never shown signs of instability. And most importantly, no one had seen her commit the crime. Even more damning for the prosecution was their reliance on circumstantial evidence. No murder weapon had been conclusively linked to her. No blood had been found on Lizzie herself. And during the preliminary hearing, Lizzie was denied the right to have her lawyer present, raising questions about due process. The jury deliberated for just over an hour. Not guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. Lizzie wept quietly. She was free, but Fall River had already made up its mind. Though the court had absolved her, the whispers never stopped. Neighbors crossed the street when they saw her. Store owners refused her service. The rest of her life would be marked not by what the jury said, but by what people believed. Lizzie Borden walked out of the courtroom a free woman. But she would never be free from the shadow of suspicion. After the trial, Lizzie Borden tried to vanish into quiet wealth. She purchased a grand Victorian home on the hill, far from 2nd Street and the blood-soaked house where the murders had occurred. She named it Maplecroft. There, she and her sister Emma hoped to live in peace, under new names and new curtains, far from the judging eyes of Fall River. But peace never truly came. Emma eventually left. Some say after a bitter argument. Others claim she could no longer live with the unspoken truth. Lizzie stayed behind, growing more reclusive with each passing year. She became the subject of gossip and cruel nicknames. Lizzie the Axe, they called her. Children would skip, rope to a rhyme etched in time. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. No matter how much she donated to charities or kept her garden neat, Lizzie remained a woman haunted. She died in 1927, alone and uncelebrated. But the story didn't end with her. It only got stranger. Not long after her death, stories began to surface. Whispers of strange happenings at the Borden House on 2nd Street. The home had long since changed hands, eventually becoming a bed and breakfast. But visitors reported eerie phenomena. Doors creaking open on their own, cold drafts in locked rooms, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing in the halls when no one was there. Some claimed to see the figure of a woman in an old-fashioned dress gliding up the staircase. Others woke in the guest room, where Abby was murdered, to find deep pressure on their chest, as though someone stood watching them in the dark. The most chilling tales involved the sound of an axe, metal scraping wood, echoing faintly through the walls during the early morning hours. Paranormal investigators set up equipment. EVPs captured whispered voices. Some claimed to hear a woman weeping, others a man groaning in pain. Skeptics dismissed it all as folklore, yet the stories persisted. Today, the Lizzie Borden House remains one of America's most visited haunted destinations. Tourists book overnight stays. Paranormal YouTubers film investigations in the dark. Some leave shaken, refusing to speak of what they saw. Others return, drawn by the house's strange magnetism. Is it the trauma that echoes? The memory of violence trapped in timber and stone? Or the spirits of Andrew and Abby Borden still searching for justice or revenge? No one truly knows. But one thing is certain. The house has never been quiet again. From murder mystery to ghost story, the Lizzie Borden case continues to chill spines more than a century later. Not just because of what happened, but because we still don't know the whole truth. And maybe, just maybe, the house is trying to tell us. Please subscribe my channel so you can get everyday new real stories.